Then you've also looked at providing safe drinking water. This is obviously something that's important. Does that work? Do we have good ways of making water safer for people at economical costs?
So this is one of the areas that Innovations for Poverty Action has done a fair amount of work on, and it's not my personal research, but what we're very proud of some of the results. And I think the striking thing here is the ability to have that common outcome, and then just test 8 different things across and say, well, okay, what's the best way of doing this? Because you can build wells, you can clean existing wells, you can clean springs, you can provide chlorine in the house, you can just teach people about chlorine, and how chlorine can help. You can provide filters. There's so many different ways and so many different things you can do. And part of this is you have to understand something about the theory as to why the problem exists in the first place. This is one of the common themes of a lot of the work we have, is you need some theory to understand why the problem exists in order to be able to understand what are potential solutions and where can these possibly work. So what was the solution that was discovered, and this is one of the things that's being scaled up by Evidence Action, which is a spin-off from Innovations for Poverty Action that is now, it's a standalone, it's its own entity that is in the field actually implementing things that have strong evidence behind them. That's its mantra. They only implement things that have strong evidence, period. And so there's this program for chlorine dispensers that what was found is if you bundle the getting water with the getting clean water to make it one step, that boom, it gets done. So you put a chlorine dispenser by the well, and then when people go to the well, they also just go to the chlorine dispenser, it's right there, and they put a dollop of chlorine in the water, and by the time they get home, it's all switched up and clean. So it has one very strong behavioral benefit about bundling and making it so it's one step, so you don't have to do it in 2 steps. But the other real benefit is on the cost side. You only have to support the supply of chlorine to the chlorine dispenser, not to every little household. Right. And so it's just much easier to maintain and operate such a program at scale. So it's a good example of kind of understanding both operations, institutions, and behavior in order to come up with a better solution for helping households get clean water.
Sounds great. I want to put to you now a sort of broader objection that people sometimes make to the kinds of specific programs that you've talked about. And what they say is, well, these programs may be all very well. They may help people to avoid some illnesses or to get consume a little bit more. But the problems are really much larger than that. We have a world in which the rich nations have tilted the trading order so that it favors them. It's difficult for poor nations to break into that. Some people would say, we have a capitalist system, and that requires some people to be poor and others to be rich. And so what we need to do is to do some much larger reform. The other stuff people will say is kind of applying a Band-Aid to a problem that needs much more radical surgery. Mm-hmm. What would you say about that?
So I have two basic thoughts. One is, we didn't get where we are in America and Europe from we got where we are through a natural process of development and innovation, and we don't need a massive reformation. We didn't need a massive reformation and someone to step back and say, how do we fix the wrongs from 100 years ago? So some of the change that people talk about in that space, I think, will just be a natural evolution of having good trade and open markets and development across countries. I think my real way of thinking about this is at a middle level, which is to say that, and I'm not opposed to someone taking the grand view about world order and trade and things of this nature, but to say, look, here's a setting. Let's take financial services as an example that I've done work on. And we know that there's some very clear market failures in financial services about being too expensive for households to get access to a bank. And when you see an innovation that can work at large scale, like take mobile money as an example, where now households can very cheaply manage to get access to a savings account, this can work for millions of people. It has a very clear theory to it about why there was a problem in the first place. Transaction costs were too high. Here's an innovation that comes in, lowers transaction costs. So it has to do with understanding the theory, and that theory can apply to millions and millions of people in an economy. And so it's not too hard to come up with other examples of this nature, where there's some innovation and there's some idea, or there's something that aid can do that directly addresses a market failure and will help the people involved, period. Now, you know, there's other things that are going to happen in the background that are all good and well about democracy and free markets and things of this nature. And that's important too in a lot of respects, but it doesn't change the fact that there's a very clear market failure that's taking place, and through some aid or innovation, it can be addressed. And so let's do it.
Okay, good. I think we're pretty much out of time, Dean. It's been a pleasure to have you down here, and I thank you for contributing to the course and to talking to the students.
Thank you.
Are there any final words that you want to say to them? Any message you want to leave?
The message I would have is about heart plus mind, I think is the most important way to think about this entire space. That it's our hearts that bring us to the table. It's our hearts that help, that motivate us to want to help others and that see problems in the world and inspire us to say, I think I can do something about that. But that our minds are what we need to help figure out how to do that best. And it's the combination. We don't want to turn off the heart. Right? That's always my biggest fear if we get too wonky, is that we turn off the heart. So I try not to do that.
Okay.
So we want to keep both.
Good. Thanks very much then, Dean. And I hope that all of you watching this will have learned from it and will have seen how it's possible to take a knowledge-based approach to this issue, while of course, as Dean just said in conclusion there, not turning off the heart. That's what may well drive you towards wanting to know the solution, but there are better and less good ways of addressing these issues. Thank you.